it in her face all the time. Imagine. And you have to see her raising her kids and seeing them, their first steps, and celebrating all this stuff, and then here you are, and she's just throwing it in your face. Hannah has a husband that loves her. That's good. He tells her, he'll tell her, I think am I not better than 10 sons to you? And I doubt if she's going to say, well, yeah. But nevertheless, she's still going through this, and he may think he's better than 10 sons. But the question I want to just kind of ask as we lift it out as a principle, what is your predicament? Because none of us have a perfect life, and none of us let everybody know what's going on. And so many things happen at home that nobody knows about. But what's your predicament? I look around, I don't think anybody here is living in a polygamous marriage. But you might be sharing your husband with pornography. It's a huge problem in and out of the church. I hope your husband isn't cheating on you with a real life person. That happens, unfortunately. But pornography is a great betrayal. And it's a huge, as I say, a huge problem. Or you may be someone who could never have children, would love to have children, could not have children. Or you may be someone who has had children, but spiritually you don't have them, in the sense that they're fully grown, but they're not walking with the Lord. Hopefully nobody's throwing that in your face. But you may feel like it, and you may experience something like this, where you know some people and you see their kids, and they may be outwardly doing all the right things as far as you can tell. Remember, we're all masters of making things look better than they really are when we're talking to people. And we can see our own world through rose-colored glasses. But you hear about it, and you have to constantly or often hear about how wonderful and godly their kids are, how great their kids are. And by the way, I've sort of alluded to it, but you don't know what's under the surface. You never know what's under the surface. No, every parent needs to be on their face for their kids until their coffin is nailed shut. Every parent needs to be praying for their kids continually, and for one another for that matter. But you don't know what's under the surface. But what's your predicament? You, in your own home, you may have all kinds of things that are troubling you, things I haven't even mentioned. Hannah's home life was anything but ideal. What about your home life? I mean, really. I'm just going to say there's no perfect family. We are all dysfunctional to varying degrees. And then there are extremes, greater or lesser degrees, and there are extremes in some families. But fundamentally, we're all dysfunctional, if you want to use that word. And one thing God uses that for is to wean us off being too comfortable in this world. He never intended us to have heaven on earth. And we can try to make our home a little reservation, insulated and isolated from everybody else, and totally miss the purpose of the family anyway, to raise up godly seed, to go forth like straight arrows and so on. Jesus says we're in the world but not of it. But there's not going to be a perfect home in this world, and God intends us to not get too comfortable in this world, but to be looking for the heavenly blessings to come. But God hears a godly mother's prayers. He knows the heart. It matters to him. He hears all of his children's prayers. But you take these things that are these, we'll call it a predicament, your plight, whatever you want to, but there's a burden there. There's something that is greatly troubling. And you do something with it, and that something is to bring these things before God. To bring them before God. And that's the second thing, is Hannah's petition. And I don't know if anybody else, I sort of kind of laugh when I read verse 8. Then Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Just because you got your rival here with all the kids and all the stuff going on and their birthday parties or whatever, and she's throwing it in your face. Why do you not eat? Why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? It's fun. You think, poor Hannah, just like, maybe like most of us guys, so clueless about things. But Verse 9, Hannah arose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. The family, that is. Now, Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. And then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. Look at her prayer. She's not saying, Lord, if you would but break the teeth in the mouth of Peninnah and strike her down. She said, Lord, please give me a son. I'm going to dedicate him to you. And ultimately, I want him to serve you and for you to get glory through this. And then in verse 12, and it happened as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. You know, I think this gives us a little insight into Eli. As you read on, Eli was an abject failure in so many ways. He's the high priest. His sons are doing all this wickedness, and he doesn't really say, you guys shouldn't be doing that. And God's gonna pronounce a judgment through Hannah's son Samuel upon Eli and upon his household. His sons are going to meet a tragic end, as will he. And he's here. He seems to be. You see a woman coming to the temple, and she's distraught, and she's silently. Her mouth is moving, and the first thing that comes to your mind is she's drunk. I don't know. Maybe plastered women showed up at the tabernacle regularly in those days. It was the time of the judges, but seemed to have no clue that maybe this could be somebody in extreme heartfelt prayer coming before God with a great burden, and is flat out assume she's drunk. Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, no, my